I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed. When by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaw opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sound, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. One of the things that's interesting about this, and maybe we talk about it, is that the canonical version of this story, this is not the this is the canonical version of the story, but this is not the cultural version of this story.
Yeah, we have a mismatch of canonical and zeitgeist.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so even when, Mel Brooks makes Young Frankenstein, he is satirizing not this. He's satirizing the Boris Karloff Frankenstein, which I've never seen, but I feel like the Bela Lugosi Dracula, I've just sort of absorbed through its through so many imitations, repetitions, and satires, like
through Saturday Night Live
and Count Chocula and what was the Frankenberries? Is that what the
Frankenberries? Yeah. And then there's Booberries.
There's Booberries.
Booberries, Frankenberries, and Count Chocula.
I can still remember when Booberries was released on the world that Frankenberry was about to open a box and Count Chocula comes into the room and says, "Don't open that box!" And then...
Because it's full of booberries instead of Frankenberries.
No. Are Frankenberries what is it really Frankenberries or something?
I think it is Frankenberries.
What is if it's Frankenstein version of Count Chocula?
Right. Now it just makes me think that they really, it is Frankenberry. Frankenberry is a strawberry flavored cereal. Why strawberry?
Blueberry is blueberry.
Well, okay, so they phoned in one of them. Frankenberry or Booberry.
Yeah.
Because, once you set up the convention of Count Chocula, and then you do either Booberry or Frankenberry, the next one logically cannot have berry in the title.
Right. I actually think Don't Open That Box was yet a new one. Don't open that box. Don't Open That Box. Oh, there's actually a scary movie. Count Chocula. Are you able to see YouTube right now?
I am able to see YouTube right now. Don't open that box.
Don't open that box. Don't open that box.
Oh, Frankenstein's.
The marshmallow ghosts are leaving our cereal. Good. Now there's room for more chocolatey marshmallow. You mean room for more strawberry flavored marshmallows? A delicious part of this complete breakfast. Shall we? Let's go. Chocula and Frankenberry coming your way.
Was it like a mashup cereal? Did they mix
I guess they
Count
they
Chocula and
took out.
Frankenberry?
Well, what did they took out? Let's say. So don't open that box.
Don't open that box. Don't open that box.
So the Booberries are escaping.
The ghosts are escaping. Oh, I want to know the story behind this.
Yeah, it looks like they kicked Booberry to the curb.
Yeah, which just makes me think that there's an intellectual property problem behind all of this.
And
that
maybe just Booberry was never selling that well, and you can imagine the cutthroat vice president at General Mills who's all right, let's get our PowerPoint ready. Except for back then, it was a Kodak carousel slideshow. We're gonna take Booberry down today at the board meeting. We're gonna some senior vice president got stabbed in the back when Booberry got kicked to the curb.
Okay, the Wikipedia page about this subject is fucking amazing. This is great. You know what?
Should we have a spin-off documentary podcast? The General Mills Monster Wars?
So like
Monster
like
voice.
what you're describing is like
Actually-
like sort of hilariously like operating in like it's not exact, but you can like really like
Yeah.
hear what is happening.
Mine is
So,
like the
okay.
Yacht Rock series version of what.
Totally, yeah. Okay, so in March 1971, the first two cereals in the line were introduced: the chocolate-flavored Count Chocula and the strawberry-flavored Frankenberry. In the commercials, the two monsters, Count Alfred Chocula and Frankenberry, would engage in comic bickering over which cereal was better when something or someone else, usually Boo Berry, interfered in their verbal sparring and scared them out of their wits. Okay, prepare yourself.
That's funny.
In 1972, Frankenberry cereal included an indigestible pigment that turned some children's feces pink, a symptom sometimes referred to as Frankenberry stool. The Count Chocula and Frankenberry recipes were reformulated to remove this pigment. Boo Berry, the first blueberry flavored cereal, was released in December 1972, and Fruit Brute in 1974. Fruit Brute was discontinued in 1983 after a 9-year run. Oh my God, this is just like.
But it doesn't get to the 1986 decoupling of Boo Berry from.
It does not. It doesn't. Yeah. We sort of lose the thread there. But it says Boo Berry is still in production seasonally.
You know, the only one of those I ever remember anybody eating was Count Chocula. I don't, and you know, I didn't eat sugar cereal in my household, but you know, like you would do it on sleepovers, and I do remember eating Count Chocula once or twice, but I never saw anybody eating Frankenberry or Boo Berry, never.
Yeah, I never. Like, there's the ramble.
So welcome to OG cereal universe.
Actually, not a bad idea. Yeah.
Really?
Like,
What else is there?
I could talk about cereal all day. You know, there's so much weird cereal out there. Honey Smacks, like
Mr. T
weird,
teaming up with Mr. T cereal.
Can't get enough of that super golden crisp. It's got the crunch with punch.
Yeah.
The like really cool, like the cool bear.
Yeah, and you know the guy who does the voice for the Grinch is also Tony the Tiger.
No, I don't.
There,
I love that.
Like they're a great
love
guy.
that
I forget
man
what
now.
his name is, but he's a famous voice actor. I don't think he's the one who sings "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch," which isn't. Who sings "You're"?
He does have a. Oh, that's the narrator, right?
Well,
Does the Grinch ever talk?
the Grinch does talk. Yeah,
Oh, he says a few he has a very few lines.
Thurl Ravenscroft. Maybe that is the guy who does Tony the Tiger. Thurl Raven. That's a
What
great
a
name. Thurl
Ravenscroft.
Ravenscroft.
That's just somebody's D&D character.
He also was Tony the Tiger. Thurl
Oh my
Ravenscroft.
God, that's awesome.
Well, I think we should probably get into this. I'm also hoping to do a little exercise tonight. As I've had a very
we should probably pull ourselves away from the siren songs of the internet.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking
Count
about
Frankenberry.
we're talking about. We are, yeah. I mean, you know, yeah. We are talking about Mary Shelley's great 1831. Is that what
Something
we
like
are?
that.
Yeah. There's a bunch of different editions. This particular edition that I am reading is based on the third edition of 1831. Mary Shelley's, you know, like perhaps invented science fiction novel Frankenstein.
Yeah, when was the Time Traveler? Later, right?
Later.
I
Yeah.
think Poe has a few stories you could call science fiction. There's one where he goes
Yeah.
to the North Pole and goes into the center of the world or something like that. But very early sci-fi novel for sure, among the very first. And it is a framed narrative. Everything is first person point of view, and I think everything is a letter or within a letter. Even when Frankenstein's talking, I believe it's being related
God,
in Walton's
you're right.
letter.
It's being related to Walton, who is
writing his sister. So we start out with Robert Walton, who is part of an expedition to the North Pole. They're starting from Arkhangelsk, or Archangel, which is sort of a little bit east of Finland, in the north coast of Russia. Walton relates his travels to his sister through a series of letters, and at one point they're sailing to the North Pole. I don't know if anybody had been to the North Pole at this point. So they're definitely on an intrepid, exploring, scientific expedition, and they see a figure on a dog sled in the distance on the ice, and then later another man who also has a dog sled appears and is half dead, and they rescue him. Turns out to be Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and after they've warmed him up and gotten some good soup into him, and he's recovered, which it takes a few days, he starts telling Walton his story.
Yeah. Yeah, because he kind of picks up that Walton is a motivated scientist after his own ilk.
Yeah.
And says, I think I should tell you some things, and begins telling him his whole life. And we learned that Frankenstein had a pretty happy childhood to his father and much younger mother, whose name is Caroline Beaufort, whom his father had rescued from poverty. Frankenstein's mother adopts a second child, Elizabeth, and eventually has a second son, William. Elizabeth gets scarlet fever at some point, but she survives, mostly because Caroline attends to her. Caroline gets scarlet fever and dies. Victor, who is quite young at this point, is understandably traumatized by this and kind of has this desire to achieve dominion over disease and heads off to school at a place called Ingolstadt. They live in Switzerland. It's not clear where Ingolstadt is, maybe Germany, maybe Austria. He studies natural philosophy, which is kind of this like alchemy, philosopher's stone, and he gets laughed at by a few professors, except for one professor who kind of encourages him to kind of keep going.
Yeah, and says something to like, yeah, those guys, we're all standing on the yeah, they were wrong, but they got us going. They got science going.
And because of his combination of kind of chemistry and natural philosophy, there's a fair bit of hand waving at this point because I mean nobody knows how to animate a series of dead tissue, and so Mary Shelley is just kind of like
still don't.
Right, yeah. And so after a very small amount of time, Frankenstein fashions this creature and animates it. As soon as he does, he is like terrified at what he has done, and he flees his apartment where his lab is, goes back a little while later and is like, oh, phew, the monster I created has disappeared.
Out of sight, out of mind. Let's get back to living life.
Let's get back to it. My buddy Henry just showed up.
Henry showed up. Maybe I'll send a letter to my cousin, sister / love interest.
Yeah, it's
Elizabeth.
Weird.
Yeah.
There's some mouth kissing.
Yeah. I don't know, but I kind of feel like Mary Shelley comes from one of those families too. So
she does.
Frankenstein returns home, back to Geneva. So we get word from home that his younger brother William has been murdered, and Frankenstein is distraught. He returns home, and while kind of investigating, he spots the creature, who is an 8-foot tall humanoid with yellowish skin. So it could sort of maybe pass for a human if you don't look too closely at it and don't have a good sense of height or scale. Frankenstein suspects that probably his creation is the one who killed his brother. He doesn't have direct evidence, but he has strong correlation. But one of the servants, Justine, is found with a necklace belonging to the brother, and so the authorities assume that she did the murder with the motive of stealing this necklace. And even though members of Frankenstein's family don't believe that Justine is guilty, she is found guilty in trial and hanged to death.
Frankenstein, during a lot of this, sort of says that he really wants to stop Justine's hanging, but he never comes forward because
nothing about that.
Yeah, he keeps saying that if I came forward and told the truth, everybody would think I was a madman. So that
He doesn't have any evidence
apparently-
other than I created this 8-foot tall monster, who I've seen lurking around. I mean, that's, you can kind of see his point, but
It's true. He does, but he does not really.
he doesn't distinguish himself as courageous or a man of action when it comes to sparing Justine from being wrongfully hanged.
He is out hiking in the Alps. He kind of heads over to Chamonix, which he says is not as nice as his hometown, but it's still pretty good. And the monster appears and approaches him and starts talking to him. Frankenstein basically says that he wants to kill the monster or abandon him. The monster basically says, if you do that, I'm going to kill everybody in your family. I would like to recount my experience to you, my creator, and I want to talk.
And Frankenstein agrees, partially because he doesn't really have a choice, but partially he's sort of like, yeah, you do have a good point. I did sort of just create you and then abandon you to the fates. I suppose I do need to hear you out. So I think they go off somewhere. I can't remember whether they go to his house or something. And the creation, I don't like calling him the monster because I don't think he's ever referred to as a monster. And also, like, it's not clear to me that this is a monster. Apart from some bad behavior, but no behavior that's any worse than any human would likely behave in a similar situation. So the creation starts to tell his story, and he talks about being, waking up and not knowing what was going on and being confused and leaving Frankenstein's apartment and wandering out into the countryside and eventually sort of making his way into, I guess, the rural area near Geneva. It's a little bit unclear. I don't know that the creation doesn't really understand the creature. Maybe doesn't really.
He gets called the wretch a lot.
The wretch.
Frankenstein calls him the wretch.
Yeah.
I wonder. I don't know if the creation would call himself the wretch. I think he might. He
says he's wretched, but I don't think I would call. To me, wretch is more of a adjectival noun than a proper description. So he goes out and he sort of has to survive as kind of like a homeless creature. And he learns things like what kind of foods he can eat, and that fire keeps him warm but can burn him.
Fire bad.
He's kind of childlike.
Yeah.
And at one point he ends up finding a little hovel that he can shelter in that's near this family. And he starts watching the family, and he learns to speak human language in a matter of months by watching them. So we gather he's quite intelligent. He learns about love, and he learns about poverty by watching the family. And I think the section that we read really just is in the middle of his observations of the family, at least as I recollect.
Yeah, the other members of they get this other character, Safi, who kind of shows
the Arabian.
Up. Yeah, the Arabian woman,
who's like
shows up kind of right in the middle.
Maybe a
of where
fiance
we finished.
for the Felix, the brother. It's a little bit unclear, but he seems because we're getting this all from the creation's perspective, and the creature seems to think, oh, there's some relationship between Felix and this guest and visitor. So I gathered maybe that they were fiancés, but I don't think I fully understand the relationship between these people.
But yeah, that's where we got to. So you've got a question about engagement.
Well, yeah. I mean, you gave a little bit of a nod by saying this is great. I'm curious. Maybe I'll just cop to. It took me. I did not immediately warm to this narrative. And so I'm curious, when in reading this, when are you hooked? When are you engaged? Where you are actually interested and entertained by this book?
Sadly, when the monster or the creation starts talking.
Okay.
Which is a fair bit of the way into the book.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's been a really long time since I read this, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there is a lot of like narrative bush clearing that has to be done before we kind of get to the good
I
stuff.
don't know that it has to be done either.
Well,
It is done. I suppose the reader has to.
on the right. That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
I don't know if the writer
Yes.
must do it.
No. The writer's not doing narrative brush clearing. The writer is actively encouraging
bush propagation, seeding the countryside.
Like, good old Mary Shelley is out there fertilizing, this initial framed narrative that I don't even think we need. But it's as I was re-engaging with this, I was like, that's right. I found the creation really great because you finally get a character with like true pathos up to this point.
Yeah.
Other than poor Justine.
And a fascinating worldview. And
totally.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I interrupted you, though. I mean, Justine definitely has pathos. I think Elizabeth does. Victor Frankenstein sometimes does, but he's also a jackass, and
exactly.
kind of a spoiled brat, and with no sense of. He has a sense of responsibility in the sense that he feels things like guilt and sadness about things that he ought to take responsibility for, but he does not, so far, actually take responsibility for any of the things that he ought to take responsibility for.
Yeah. I think a spoiled brat is a great way to describe him. Like he's essentially this entitled kid who's never been kind of like taught how to deal with the bad shit that happens in his life.
Yeah.
Like his mother dies tragically, and you get no sense that anybody really kind of like helps with that, and like he very sensibly forms an idea of like, that sucked, disease is bad. And then like when he tries to talk to his dad about natural philosophy, his dad totally drops the ball. His dad is like, those guys are idiots. And like, if you ever tell a 14-year-old that stuff that you're reading is by a bunch of idiots, like that's the thing that Mary Shelley nails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Mary Shelley very clearly, I mean, and if her life was like one tragedy after another. Like Mary Shelley also like,
I think she would know something about a not very attentive, sort of self-absorbed father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And or husband. I don't know. I don't know much about Percy Bysshe Shelley. So
he dies not long after they get married. He tragically drowns about 7 years after they elope.
I always think of him as like nice Byron, like sort of Byron, but not an asshole. Is sort
right.
of
less Byron with something of a conscience.
Right.
But yeah, 3 of her 4 children die. Her sister kills herself.
Yeah.
Like it's there are plenty of parallels between, which is funny because she started writing this before a lot of the tragedy in her life took place.
Yeah. Frankenstein certainly has a lot of, he lost his mother young, midway through this narrative, he loses his brother. But he certainly has things to be upset and sad about. He also is rather naive and I think has a tremendous amount of hubris too.
Yes. Yeah. And like, the other big theme here is like the way that our creators let us down.
Yeah.
Whether they are parents or necromancers.
Right.
Yeah. No, I totally, I also was struggling with the first 2 frames of this. Like, I did not remember the Richard Walton stuff at all. And so I was like, is part of this book takes place at the North Pole?
Well,
what?
And since you brought that up, I mean, let me ask you, what do we get from the narrative frame, that framing device, but also we get a lot of Victor Frankenstein's life before I would say any kind of inciting incident. I mean, like in a way, you could sort of start the novel at the death of his mother. When I was 7 years old, my mother died, like could be the first sentence of this novel.
Yeah.
And
if he could get in that first sentence, I'm 7, my mother dies of scarlet fever, sparing my sister who, like something like that,
Yep.
where you get so much of the plot.
Or
in
when
the
I was
first.
7, my sister who was adopted. Yeah, it is. I mean, I guess you do sort of, there's part of understanding Frankenstein is understanding this kind of complex sort of almost Brady Bunch like family that he emerges from. Not a like smaller version of the Brady Bunch, but
Great idea.
I mean, I guess that's part of it, but I also I don't know. I think part of my complaint too is that even though I've been given these biographical details, when he starts working on the creation, I still have a vague sense of him as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Nor do I like him very much. I don't find him that likable at that point. I'm just like, here's this like college student who decided he's going to make a dude.
Yeah. I mean, the first character that you actually feel like is fully rendered is the creation. And, and I'm not gonna be too much of an apologist for Mary Shelley here, but you can really sense her like finding her way into, and also like finding her way not only into her story, but like a brand new genre and a brand new subgenre. And like, the whole thing comes out of a ghost story competition with her and Shelley
her and Byron, right? They're hanging out in Geneva, and like she's part of this like literary salon. Summer, she's like the new kid hanging out with the poets who are in their 30s at this point, who are much better established, and they have this ghost story competition. She clearly wins, A.
Right.
B, but I also feel like, I mean, I could see in that situation wanting to experiment with form. I mean, she does a thing we've talked about. She kind of does a literary fake out, like Psycho, like From Dusk Till Dawn, like that episode of The Simpsons you talked about, where the story it seems like we're going to be reading about, like, is this going to be a ghost story on the North Pole? Is this going to be set on the North Pole? Or are we going to be hanging out with Walton and his expedition? Is it going to be kind of like the Demeter scene from Dracula, where like shipmates start vanishing? Nope. Nope. But I mean, but also like, I think we both agree that we don't like it, but if we're going to play devil's advocate, if it's not just a 22-year-old writer experimenting, if there is some purpose, if there's some affordance to the Walton frame, what is it?
Yeah. Okay. I was sort of thinking about this question also and being like, okay, this is a series of Russian nesting dolls. Like that, like it feels like she didn't, the easy answer, which sort of falls into this is a naive writer who's figuring out what she's doing. The easy answer is that she couldn't figure out, how do I set up a situation in which my main character wants to tell the story of his life? So she's like, okay, so I've got to create a younger, naive version of Frankenstein, and I've got to like bounce them together somehow. And the North Pole seems like a place that scientists will go to, and that's how I'm going to get into the story.
Okay.
And there's some suggestion, because we do know that there's that other sled driver that we see at the beginning.
That's the creation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so we know that like something is going to.
Well, yeah. I mean, so one
around.
one of the affordances is foreshadowing of a chase. I mean, I think there's another. I pulled up a little section of the first letter from Walton where he's signing off, and he says, "I shall depart for the latter town in a fortnight or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary among those who are accustomed to whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June. And when shall I return? Ah, dear sister, how can I answer this question? If I succeed, many, many, many months, perhaps years, will pass before you and I may meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon, or never. Farewell, my dear, excellent Margaret. Heaven shower down." Okay. That's a clue. Right. And you said it earlier that Frankenstein's talking to a younger version of himself.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the person Frankenstein is telling the story to is a kind of young, proud, reckless seeker of scientific knowledge, brother, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some rhyme there.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it gets us other than, I mean, if I had to just guess, I do think this story is a parallel. I mean, also, isn't the subtitle The Modern Prometheus?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's about information that probably shouldn't get out, but in the getting out forges some other benefit for the greater, humanity. And yeah, I mean, that's clearly, we're in a story about technology,
Yeah.
and also the
drive to explore science and technology are not quite the same thing, but they're closely related. And the drive to explore the scientific world, the biological world, the great mysteries, and how that is maybe simultaneously a noble and a dangerous impulse.
Yeah. But I would sort of throw out there, like, the other great framed narrative that takes place on a boat is Heart of Darkness. And like the character that hears the actual character's story, we're in and out in like a page. Like it's pretty much like, oh, like, I was on this boat. This guy came on board. He told me this crazy story about going to Africa. There we go. And like, we're off and running, and we don't even like ever learn what that character's name is.
I mean, is this just a 19th century thing that like writers think that readers need an explanation of why this text came into existence?
I think so.
Because I do. Because you know what? Like Dracula has it. A Study in Scarlet has it. But I think both of those books, which we've just read, make wonderful usage of those epistolary conventions, because with Watson, you get to see Watson watching Holmes, and you get to see Watson's curiosity and affection and understanding of this curious being grow in a way that's very seductive and charming. Watson forms a wonderful foil and counterpart to Holmes, but also a wonderful lens on Holmes. And then I think we talked about this last time, that halfway through Dracula, we figure out that, it's probably Mina Harker who is the author, that she's the one who's typed up everything and transcribed, a man after my own heart. The doctor, John Seward, is keeping an audio diary. He's keeping a podcast. He's making a podcast about Dracula, and she's the one who compiles all of that. But in so doing, one of the plot devices, Bram Stoker uses the fact that we're getting multiple people's accounts to put the reader's knowledge of what's going ahead of all the characters, because the reader has access to all the information. We can be like, you morons, close the bleeping windows, and like the other characters are like, I strongly suspect that something is happening, and I'm going to put some garlic by the windows, but I dare not describe what I think might be going on, and so there's this wonderful narrative effect where more than the characters do because of the epistolary novel. But what you're suggesting to me is more like an explanation for why she did it, as opposed to this is what it gets you.
Right, and I think, I'm going to go out on a limb here. So we're about 60 years before Dracula, almost 70.
Yeah.
And we are 30 years before A Study in Scarlet? 30, right?
Dracula and Study in Scarlet are within a few years of
contemporary.
Each other. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're like,
those guys have had a lot lot of time to refine this.
Right. And
they clearly read Frankenstein too. Like they have learned from Mary Shelley.
Okay, to really go out on a limb here, but I'm going to do my best. And this is about your question about what did 19th century readers need? And, like, the novel is new. Like, it's not super new, but it's pretty new. And the way that a lot of people are getting whether it's a play or poetry, even in plays, there's very often somebody who has to bring you into the action. So we have choruses.
Yep.
And this happens even in a lot of Shakespeare. And then he finally figures out that, oh, wait, if we just start in the middle, that's like way better.
Yeah.
But we still get a lot of framing.
Right.
And most poetry, pre 20th century, also does a fair amount of explication of like situating the reader exactly where they are. And I would go out on a limb and say that there might be a suspension of disbelief thing happening where authors of that time needed to convince readers that like there's a reason that this shit is on the page. Yeah. That readers might have been less willing to just like be like, oh, it's a book, there's a story in it. I'm helping a friend of mine here in town was like, hey, I'm interested in learning more about literature. Do you think you can like do some coaching for me? And I was like, oh, interesting. And I thought about it and I was like, well, the place you have to start is perspective, because like we, at this point, if you engage with books and think about storytelling, you kind of like move past that question of who is talking.
Right.
And then I think a lot of people who don't have the experience don't think about that. They don't like think about like, oh, this is first person, this is second person, this is third person omniscient, this is third person limited. What's the interplay between authority and reliability? Like all of that stuff. And maybe Shelley feels like she has to erect some scaffolding around her story to give it more authority. I'm reaching, but like that's where I would kind of get to if you think about the kind of media that people in the early 19th century are digesting. It's a lot of poetry, it's a lot of plays, and it's a lot of newsletters.
Yeah.
It's a lot of just like, like the Rambler and stuff like that.
Funny. Everything comes full circle.
Yeah, so a fictional account in this sort of narrative style was new. And so maybe she was just like, shit, I gotta somehow make a case for this.
I mean, maybe she was right about it too. I think to a modern reader, my sense is it is actually a problem. But maybe, I think your hypothesis is correct. And, what I was trying to get at was like, what if we're wrong? What if it's doing something brilliant that we're not picking up on? But it also might just be that the affordances would have been necessary to a reader at that time, and they're not necessary now because the conventions and expectations have changed enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be sort of where I land, because like I could really stand to start sooner. And not only start sooner, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I sort of went in another direction, but was basically like, if Neil Stephenson wrote this, how much time would have been spent on making the creation?
Oh, a lot. Yes. And also, or Larry Niven, this is not hard sci-fi. And you talk about hand waving it away, and in a way, like, you could argue that this is better, but I actually think that I've read like super hard sci-fi, and I've also, like, Andy Weir would tell us how it was done. Stevenson would tell us how it was done. There are other writers like Ursula Le Guin or Scalzi who would say, or, the writers of Back to the Future who would say, I invented the flux capacitor. It looks like this. That there would be a little bit more. I mean, all we get is that like the components came from slaughterhouses and gravestones, which I think if you think about the 20th century versions of Frankenstein, they're like, okay, well, he had to have his neck bolted together, and often like the body has stitches because he's been assembled from multiple corpses. And I'm talking, when I say Frankenstein here, I'm talking about Frankenstein's monster, aka the creation. That those depictions of that creation, even those are kind of going out on a limb. She really gives you almost nothing. I guess you're supposed to allude, okay, if the materials are coming from graveyards, he's probably grave robbing. And if the materials are coming from slaughterhouses, and And you also have the sense that it's multiple human bodies that have been assembled together somehow into something that's superhuman. You know, how would you make an 8-foot tall humanoid? Like maybe their tibia would also be a femur. You know, like you would use
just like
it's
like the whole torso is just a cow.
Yeah, and you would have
like,
2 humeruses, like, or something like that, like
sort of.
or use like a pig skeleton or something. But it doesn't go into any detail about that, and tempting to be a little sexist about it, like like women in the 19th century just had no scientific grounding, but that's not the case. She was incredibly well read. She could have read a little bit of anatomy. I think that's a literary choice, and that doesn't bother me so much. But you're right. It's totally different, and it is funny, like how many like social details and emotional details we get about Frankenstein, and then we spend about 2 paragraphs describing him building the creation.
Yeah. I would say the biggest problem with it is that it falls into the trap of thinking that chronology is structure. That if we just kind of get on that chronological train and keep moving forward, that we're going to carry the narrative along with us. And it does, I think that, there are like plenty of successes in this book. And once the creation starts talking, it is really engaging because you feel like watching him begin to understand poverty and love is
amazing.
Great.
Amazing.
Yeah. Like I am so in, but boy, it takes a lot of reading about like the only character I really cared about up until this point was Justine, because I was like, that is not cool.
Well, and that's well done by the author, although maybe, I mean, this also gets at maybe a critique I have of Shelley and her father, Godwin. They seem to be sort of intellectuals who like the idea of poor people without actually liking poor people. That I mean, I could be wrong about that. You've just queued up one of my readings.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it.
This is right after the creation opens its eyes and starts moving. And then this is in Frankenstein's narration, presumably lying there in the ship on sailing to the North Pole, talking to Walton. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful? Great God, his yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So he sort of leaves the room, but as he leaves the room, I think he glimpses it again. I started from my sleep with horror. So this is a little bit later. This is after he's like passed out in horror at how terrible this creature is. And then he has a dream about Elizabeth and he wakes up. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth chattered and every limb became convulsed. When by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaw opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sound, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. There's interesting imagery there.
Yeah.
But what's his complaint with the creation, as you understand it?
Just like that, there's nothing clear. Like he just like he
it's,
you get the
it's ugly.
that's
the problem. You made a creature and it's ugly.
And even worse that
And he's like, no,
he
you don't
thought
understand.
it was going to be beautiful.
It's really fucking ugly.
Yeah,
it's not.
Like even the things that he sort of contrived to try to give it, like white teeth and lustrous black hair, but all of these details are simply upping upping the perversion.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where, well, it's like lipstick on a pig, that he has like added all of these things to try to make this zombie, more appealing. And so like the thing is like, yeah, it seems like his two complaints are, oh, it's ugly, and B, I thought it would be prettier.
and then it like walks over, and so then like, okay, you take it from
reaches out.
Yeah,
he
take it
thinks
from
it's like
this being wakes up.
Like,
there's a guy, and this guy's like, oh my god, and runs away and passes
clearly
out.
trying to capture me.
And then the Cretan walks over and like smiles and is like, Dad, like I'm here.
I also love that it's like it like pulls the curtain back from the bed like it's in like a like a canopy bed or something. It's just like the imagery is hilarious.
Well, I think it's Frankenstein's bed. Like it's like he's in his bed, and
he comes over to his bed.
The creation walks over to his bed like after he's been napping for a bit and like opens it up. Which I mean, it's childlike. He's childlike.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have any idea what's happening. We understand that this creature has human intelligence, but at this point has almost like no language, doesn't know what's going on. All it knows is it woke up and like there is this creator in front of it who seems horrified by it. And like and I don't know, I also find it very pitiable.
Yeah.
But what I don't know is what Mary Shelley's if Mary Shelley's intention is for Frankenstein to just seem incredibly boorish in that moment, then I guess it succeeds. Although I kind of have the sense that we're supposed to be horrified by the creation too, and only later when the creation starts talking, maybe recognize that was an overreaction or that's unjust. But to me, it's just like, yeah, it's imagine that you had a child you thought was ugly, and then your reaction to it was like, "Oh my God, ugly child!"
It's gonna run away.
I mean, that's the monstrous behavior. It just, I found that moment very strange and hard to wrap my readerly brain around. Even though the description is, in many respects, vivid and brilliant, and she's capable of that. And some of the landscape descriptions are capable of that, and even what I did like about that section, the physical descriptions are stronger than usual.
Yeah, it's, we've talked about this a bunch before, where there are works where the ideas save the execution and the legacy of the novel.
It's a great story. It's a great story.
Yeah, it's a great story and wildly innovative. And
Absolutely.
like maybe innovative. I mean, we still have, there's always been stories about mankind animating things that should not be animated. This, I think, might be the first one that gives narrative voice to one of the creations, and in a way that is really quite compelling. Yeah. And so, like maybe the thing that we chalk this up to is like, she's figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like this is sort. I mean, she literally starts writing this when she's 18. It takes a while.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's a very naive work. I'm gonna spring on you the question you had for me in the first half of Dracula. One word. What is this book about so far?
Folly. And,
Yeah,
and
I
if I
ended
had two words, I would say foolish pride.
Yeah, I was landing on hubris. Like that's where
Hubris would be that was probably the other choice. I mean, and we talked about it already. Frankenstein's a spoiled brat, and he thinks, he's like, oh, death is bad, which, I understand, and I don't want to be mean because he lost his mother at a young age, but it is hubristic to seek to defeat death. It's not hubristic to try to ease people's suffering or to try to treat disease, but I think I think I think the novel is embodying that hubris, and I think the creation is the embodiment of that hubris and that folly. And it's also, I mean, it's a way that, you know, as I'm thinking about it now, and maybe this is why we like the creation section so much, is it's like that poor child who lost his mother is mirrored by the creation emerging and then immediately being rejected by his creator, his father, and then, you know, tracking him down in the wilderness and essentially saying, you know, treat me like your father or I'll kill you and everybody you love, you know, is a very childlike reaction to that. But, you know,
but it's a childlike reaction, but one that the creation has like learned from his creator, basically.
I hold the creation completely blameless thus far.
Totally.
I mean, it is wrong to kill William and Justine, but how can we expect something that's 1 year old that has the strength of, you know, the strongest human ever? I mean, if we created a baby and made it 8 feet tall and gave it intelligence and then rejected it, what would happen?
Yeah.
It would rip somebody apart.
Yeah, we would have a small Godzilla.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have one more reading and then I can be done. I mean, unless it sounds like you have a reading or a question.
There's like, I have like an observation that I kind of wanted to just get out there and kick around. You know, books of this era, and like when we're talking about themes of creation and stuff like that, it's really easy to start sliding into like Judeo-Christian parables or allegory or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it is weird that the only time that we see a member of the clergy show up is like a terrible, horrible, manipulative person who gets Justine to confess. And she even is like, I was pressured by this asshole confessor. Yeah. And then it's gone. And I've been having trouble reconciling that, because I'm like, this is a book about a maker and a creation, a maker who forsakes his creation. Like there's so many trappings of
and
the
also
Jesus story.
The system of justice is thought of as corrupt as well.
But it's odd. Like I feel like there's threads that are not really. I'm interested in it, but I'm sort of like, is this a theme here? Is it not? I'm not totally sure.
Well, I've been reading this book off and on called Blood in the Machines, which is a history of the Luddite movement, and William Godwin was a central figure in that movement. Mary Shelley's father, and I don't know to what degree Shelley followed her father's philosophy and beliefs, but he was an atheist. He was anti-institution. He believed that religious institutions and government institutions were corrupt. They were responsible for poverty. He was something of a labor organizer. He was something of a Luddite. So I think it's entirely possible that Mary Shelley's view of religion is similar to her father's, which is that it is a corrupt, evil institution. And, I do think she's rendering Frankenstein. I don't know if she wants Frankenstein to be likable or not. I think she sort of does, but I don't think it's an accident that he comes off as a spoiled brat, and Mary Shelley or William Godwin is also anti-wealth, although he also wanted to live like a wealthy person. So, we might be seeing in the worldview of the writer in that. Yeah, it was not a very common worldview in the early 1800s. She was a radical. I mean, she was a member of what we would now call the far left, and that was unusual, but those were her, and sort of the bohemian left too. I mean, like Mary Shelley, Percy by Shelley, Byron hanging out Geneva is like, these were sort of bohemian radical sorts who rejected the institutions of their time, and that might be what's
maybe
going on.
maybe that's it, and maybe it's just another feature of the like slightly disorganized nature of the book, because it felt incongruous to me.
All right, so this was one of the moments that I found really admirable, and I think my view and your view agree that the book gets really good when the creation starts talking and starts describing. So this is after he's run away, but before he's met the family that he kind of attaches himself to. But this is before he's encountered that family. So he's kind of living on the road, sort of homeless monster. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. I examined the materials of the fire, and to my joy found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I was pained at this, and sat still, watching the operation of the fire. The wet wood, which I had placed near the heat, dried, and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and by touching the various branches, I discovered the cause, and busied myself in collecting a great quantity of wood, that I might dry it, and have a plentiful supply of fire. When night came on, and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves, and placed wet branches upon it, and then, spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground, and sunk into sleep.
I'm like right in it,
Yeah.
like we're in a, so many of the books that we probably read growing up, like My Side of the Mountain and Hatchet and all of these books about like learning the natural world. And what's great about this is that it is this like, I mean, so much about this book is about exploring opposites, and like just that one moment of like, oh, here's this thing that makes me warm, oh my god, and it hurts me, and like, so we can talk about family dynamics, and we can talk about love and relationships and things like that. And it's just, like, if it really does feel like this book could have like not only have been just a cultural touchstone, but just a revelation if we had started more with the creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, and what's interesting is, we're at this moment in literary history where there's a real conflict between thinking and feeling, between like romance and enlightenment. And like, I bet that Byron was like, man, just get there sooner. Just get to the, just get to the, like, get to the good stuff.
Yeah. I wonder what those guys thought about it. I mean, the other thing I love about, I think that passage too, is not only does it have this like just casual observation of how the same cause can produce pain and joy, which is great, right? Like it's wonderfully poetic and figurative, but also she just layers on like defeat, victory. Like the fire burned, oh, I found the fire and it was great, but then it burned me. I put some wet wood on, but it wouldn't burn. But then it dried. Oh, and then how did the fire work? I didn't know. I realized, oh, it's wood. I know I can find more wood, but the wood I found was wet. Oh, it doesn't burn. Oh, I can dry it out. And just these like constant, like, when we're talking about Hamlet's hit points, like upbeats and downbeats, little ones. And like great narratives have upbeats and downbeats contained within the upbeats and downbeats too. And I just thought it was a masterful little bit. And also just this childlike creature making sense of the world around it, abandoned by its creator, is there's just a lot of pathos in that. And when she, you're right. I wish she got to the point sooner, but when she hit on that, it was a brilliant moment.
Yeah. Well, let's go to trivia. I've lost track of who's supposed to go first at this point.
All right. I'm going to roll a die on Google.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
Even or odd?
Odd.
Roll a 20-sided die. 9. You pick, or you go first.
All right. So Mary Shelley had what we might describe as a complicated relationship with her mother's grave. Out of these 3 options, which is not a rumor about Shelley's actions at her mother's burial site? A, that she lost her virginity there to her future husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley. B, that she and Percy and Byron schemed to exhume the body and move it to the Shelley lodgings in Italy. Or C, that she learned how to write her own name by tracing the letters on her mother's grave. So we're looking for the thing that is not a rumor about Mary Shelley.
You and I were just hanging out in Joshua Tree, which is famous for being a place that Graham Parsons' body was pilfered and moved and then set on fire. So to me, I'm going to guess that you were influenced by that, and that is the fictitious one. So I say B.
Correct. Bravo. Yes, that sort of scheming never really happened. So we were left with the two wonderful details.
Sounds like the sort of sick rumor that would fly and may very well be true in this particular case, or maybe not. Okay, well, I also have trivia about Mary Shelley's family. So as we talked about before, William Godwin was Mary Shelley's father. And among many other things that he wrote that abolishing poverty would dissolve crime and vice, that poverty is an artificial result of unjust institutions, and that superfluous wealth is a moral wrong, and that need is the true title to goods. In spite of all that, which of these anecdotes are not true? A, when he and his wife, so again, same framing as you, 3 anecdotes, awesome. One of them is not true. When he and his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft, were both working on writing projects, they sent each other little notes, which were conveyed from one writing cottage to another by their servants. B, when Godwin was awarded a sinecure position as office keeper and yeoman usher of the receipt of the exchequer at the Palace of Westchester, which came with a comfortable allowance, he neglected his duties as chimney sweeper, and shortly thereafter most of the palace was destroyed in a fire. Or C, he was opposed to marriage as an institution, but insisted on marrying Wollstonecraft so that her father's fortune would pass to him, quote, so that the wealth now reposing in thy father's hands may, at the period appointed by nature, descend to mine, and thus the labor of my understanding may be devoted, free from degrading toil, to the impartial search of truth and the propagation of enlightened principles. Basically, I don't believe in marriage, but let's get married so I can get your dad's money.
Right, and then I can continue to talk about
how
the problems of poverty. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh, boy. Let's see. I know you had a busy day today, so I'm not sure you had enough time to put together that accurate a quote of his, though if you did, I'll be very impressed. My God, I really want the chimney sweep to be true. Notes conveyed back and forth by servants. I'm going to say A is not true.
A is true.
Damn it.
I invented C.
Way to go, man. Way to go. That is a good quote.
He
instead
instead decided to get married so that their child, Mary Shelley, would not be considered illegitimate.
Nice. Okay. Great work. You did a really nice job with that.
Well, Godwin was always looking for money
quote.
So that he could write and not have to work. I mean, not that writing is not work, but he was always trying to find some rich person or another to sponsor him so he could write about how there shouldn't be rich people.
Well, I'm very happy that B is true, that he neglected his duties as a chimney sweep and the palace burned down.
The Palace of Westchester, which is Parliament that Guy Fawkes tried to blow up, and one of his biographers, who's like a radical, was like, that's Godwin's got one up over Fawkes.
That's amazing. That's great.
But I also want to know who appointed William Godwin to a sinecure position of office keeper and yeoman usher of the receipt of the exchequer at the Palace of Westchester anyway.
You're right. Yeah, that's...
But it does seem to be one of these political appointee bullshit jobs where you can draw a salary. All you have to do is make sure somebody sweeps the chimney out every so often. Which...
he didn't... you're right. He didn't have to sweep the chimneys.
No, he just had
what the heck?
He just had to send a note. He had to have a servant send a note to the chimney sweeper saying, "My good man, when you get a chance, please cause that the chimneys be swept such that, when nature takes its
the
course,
Parliament does
the
not
smoke
burn down."
Yeah. But he didn't even bother to do that, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love these folks. Someday I'll make you read Arcadia, which is a wonderful reimagining of what would happen if you turned Byron loose on a estate with several pretty ladies and one math prodigy.
Modern times or
it's a 1993 play, Tom Stoppard. It is fantastic.
I thought you were going to say
really
turn Byron loose in Hollywood, and I was like, well, you have Russell Brand, so I think
you're right. My God, he is the modern incarnation of Byron.
I mean, there are
even
more than
slowly
one.
losing his mind.
Yeah, there are more than one, but
well. What is up next?
What is up next is the second half of this book, and we didn't even often we talk about what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll find out in the second half of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, coming up next on Upper Middlebrow.
And Upper Middlebrow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes have, after several months of labor, collected and arranged the materials. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by me, Chris Bagg. We are supported by Jenny Grieve and Justin Reich. Find us on Patreon, where there are a number of tiers at which you could show your support.
And as a reminder, Chris and I are both writers and editors and can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. We might advise you when you can just completely eliminate a framing device that you don't need. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com, or you can enroll as a patron at the you really like us tier. See, strike one of those reallys, which includes some one-on-one editorial time with one of us or the other, or both. Oh, and by the way, we're on Blue Sky now, so find Upper Middlebrow on Blue Sky. Thanks, everybody. Draw the curtains before you go to bed. Make sure there's no monsters. We'll see you next time.
In your room. Thanks for listening, everybody.
And if you're gonna make a new-ass person, be nice to it.